On the corner of Madison Avenue and Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, there is a storefront that overshadows even the ego of the city that never sleeps. Aurora Jewellery exudes quiet sophistication at its core. Its frosted glass doors open smoothly, revealing a space that looks more like a temple. White columns, cold marble, discreet aroma of jasmine, and a respectful silence that only luxury can impose. But on that morning of cloudy skies and icy wind, it wasn't a precious stone that caught people's attention, but rather a presence. Mara Fields, 38, skin as dark as polished onyx, curly hair carefully tied in an elegant bun, jumped out of the back seat of the executive car with the ease of someone who has the world under control, or at least has learned not to show the cracks. She wore an impeccably tailored dark gray overcoat, mid-heels, and a sapphire necklace that shone discreetly beneath her wool collar. She didn't carry any bags, just her upright posture and sharp gaze, accustomed to measuring spaces with a single turn. Amara wasn't a customer. She was the founder, CEO, and majority owner of Aurora and Alma, a jewelry company she had dreamed up, designed, and built over a decade of quiet struggles. Each piece inside the store carried a trace of his vision, strength, ancestry, elegance. But despite being the mind and soul behind the luxury empire, Mara was invisible there, as she was so often in so many other spaces. Invisible, or worse, judged before the first word. That morning she had decided to visit the store unannounced, a test perhaps, or an impulse. I was returning from a meeting and felt like taking a closer look at the new spring collection that had just been launched. I expected to find a team aligned with the brand's values, as I always reinforced in meetings. But what she found left her motionless, not with surprise, for surprise requires a certain innocence, but with an old weariness, sharp as broken glass. Upon entering the store, eyes were diverted. No smile, no good morning. The manager, a white woman in a beige blazer and an impatient look, approached in a hurry, not to serve, but to block. "Can I help you with anything? Customers need to schedule an appointment for quotes." Amara did not respond immediately. She studied the window, her reflection in the glass, and then, in a low, firm voice, she said, "Yes, I want to speak to the store manager." Before she became CEO of one of New York's most respected jewelry houses, Amara Fields was just the girl who drew gems in the back of a cheap spiral notebook. Growing up in the Harlem neighborhood, in a small two-bedroom apartment with her mother and two younger brothers, she was introduced to the glitter of jewelry, not through luxury, but through the need to dream amidst the cracked concrete. At age 7, she spent hours in the public library, fascinated by art books and fashion magazines. The Fifth Avenue storefront she saw only when her mother took her on the bus to clean offices became imaginary canvases for her own designs. She scribbled necklaces with shapes inspired by African symbols, earrings that resembled constellations. By age 12, she understood proportions, texture, and contrast of materials with the precision of a professional jeweler. But no one called her that yet. Life never was kind. Amara faced rejection at design schools for not fitting the aesthetic profile. She worked as a saleswoman in jewelry stores while studying at night. At one of these stores, she was fired for being too serious with customers, but she didn't give in. She enrolled in a technical course. Then she got a partial scholarship to the Parsons School of Design. She earned every penny that paid for her tuition, with nights turning over packages for home deliveries and weekends as a freelancer in the studios of little-known artists. It was there, among saws, polishers, and experimental jewelry, that she shaped her talent. Her pieces began to gain prominence at alternative art fairs, until a necklace made of recycled silver and volcanic stones appeared in a Vogue column about emerging artists. That was the beginning. At just 30 years old, she founded Aurora M. Alma, a name that pays homage to her maternal grandmother, Aurora, and the very essence of her Alma vision. The proposal was worn. Jewelry that celebrated black ancestry, feminine, strength and luxury with purpose. Critics twisted the nose. The public, no. Black women, executives, artists, and even celebrities embraced the brand as a symbol of elegant resistance. In 5 years, the company expanded to 3 physical stores and a global online presence. Mara, however, never stopped being vigilant. She knew that the world was not yet ready to accept, without filters, a black woman in a position of power in an elitist sector. Even so, she never played the victim, only prepared herself, empowered her team, invested in training, hired with diversity. Her values were imprinted in the company culture, and even so, cases of microaggression did not stop happening. She had become a public figure, discreet, averse to the spotlight, but her name was known in business circles. Her firm stance and unwavering ethics earned her the respect of even skeptics. Still, when she walked like any other unidentified black woman into her own store, the gaze of others still dared to challenge her with the old and insidious judgment. You belong here. And that was what most consumed. Amara's success didn't shield her. It just exposed the structures. Her life was a constant mirror of society, shiny on the surface but full of cracks deep down. That's why, that morning, when she heard the manager treat her like an intruder, Mara wasn't surprised, but she wasn't willing to keep quiet. She remembered every closed door, every no disguised as advice, every sentence said with a cold smile. Her history was made of steel, and now, inside the store that was born from her sweat, someone had forgotten to check who was in front of them. The silence that formed after Amara's question, "I want to speak to the person in charge of the store," was brief, but charged with tension. The manager frowned as if trying to decipher if the woman was joking. There was arrogance in her gaze, but also a confidence shaped by deep-rooted racial assumptions. "I'm the manager," she replied, puffing out her chest. "And if you haven't scheduled the appointment, unfortunately, I'll ask you to come back another day." Amara held her gaze for a few cold seconds, like diamonds in direct light. She could have identified herself immediately. She could have flashed her badge, mentioned her name, given her position, but she chose silence. She wanted to know how far this would go. Around her, 2 saleswomen exchanged nervous glances, perhaps recognizing who she was but too hesitant to intervene. The manager turned her back and walked to the counter. "Security, please escort the lady to the door," she said with administrative coolness. The security guard, a black man, visibly hesitated. His eyes met Amara's, and he froze for a second. He recognized her and knew instinctively that there was something deeply wrong with this order. Still, he began to walk with unsteady steps. It was then that Mara calmly took a black card with gold lettering from her pocket. Amara Fields, CEO, Aurora in Seoul. Gracefully, she placed it on the marble counter in front of the manager, who until then had not bothered to ask her name. "This should make communication easier," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. The manager looked at the card, then at Amara, and felt the blood drain from her face. She tried to speak, but the words seemed stuck in her throat. The saleswomen were now pale, completely in shock. The security guard stood still. "Senora Fields, forgive me, I didn't know," stammered the manager with an artificial smile, trying to save what was already irretrievably lost. Amara walked to the center of the store, her heels echoing like gavels of justice. She stopped in front of the display window that displayed the Raiz de Luz necklace, one of the most important pieces of the new collection, inspired by the Quilombola resistance. The necklace was hers, the creation was hers, but that morning she was treated as if she didn't even have the right to look at it. She turned to everyone present. The previously arrogant atmosphere now trembled with tension and shame. Gather. The entire team in the salon now. The manager hesitated. Now she repeated to Mara more firmly. In less than 2 minutes, everyone was in a semicircle. Mara took a deep breath. At dawn, in the soul, there is no space for prejudice disguised as protocol. There is no room for judgments based on appearance. If a black woman wearing a sapphire necklace walks into our store and your first reaction is to assume she can't afford what she created, then we have failed, and failed badly. She turned directly to the manager. You're fired, and you're going to leave now without calling security. The woman opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She grabbed her purse and left, under the stunned gaze of the staff. A minute was all it took between humiliation and reparation. But for Amara, that minute carried the weight of a lifetime. The silence that filled the store after the manager's dismissal was thick as fog. No one moved. The staff's eyes were on Amara, not just as their CEO, but as something more, a symbol of resistance in the flesh. She was no longer just a brilliant founder with bold ideas and visionary collections. She was a woman who was hurt, and yet still standing. Mara took a deep breath. She knew that this moment could not end with just a dismissal. The problem was deeper. Deep. It was in the structure. It was in the little silences that no one dared to break, in the averted glances, in the fake smiles, in the normalization of the absurd. I don't care that she was competent in the reports, or that she met targets, he said, looking directly at the employees. If one of our employees doesn't recognize the values that founded this company, then she doesn't belong here. What's more, if no one here has the courage to act, then we are all failing. She walked slowly across the hall. I built this company not just to sell jewelry. I built it because I wanted to offer black women, like me, like you, a place where we could see ourselves represented in luxury, in art, in leadership. A space where we wouldn't need to ask permission to shine. Amara's eyes were now teary, but she didn't back down. Each word was a blow against the complicit silence. When you saw me being treated like someone who didn't belong, what did you feel? Shame, fear, indifference. The employees began to look away, but a young woman with long braids named Yasmine stepped forward. I felt angry, she said in a firm voice, and ashamed of myself for not having done anything. I knew who you were, but I was afraid to get involved, afraid of appearing to be taking sides. And now I realize that my silence was also a form of violence. Amara nodded. Thank you, Yasmine. That's what we need. Courage to break the cycle, because it is everywhere, not only outside the doors, but inside them too. She turned to the rest of the team. Let's reformulate the trainings. Let's do mandatory awareness sessions. And it won't be an online course that you mark as completed without even opening it. It will be live with real stories, with active listening, and with discomfort, yes, because real change is not comfortable. One of the sales consultants, Marco, raised his hand. He was Latino, had worked there for 2 years, and rarely spoke up in meetings. Senora Fields, I saw what happened, and I just wanted to say that I learned more in these last 15 minutes than in all the trainings I've ever had at other companies. What happened today was wrong, and we really need to change that. Mara smiled, softly. It was the hard smile of someone who carries scars. Thank you, Marco. This is just the beginning, and I will hold everyone here accountable because I will not allow Aurora in Alma to become yet another place where black people are only welcome in advertising campaigns, but not in decision-making, in leadership positions, or even as respected customers. She approached the door, looked through the window at the pulsating city outside, a world that pretended to be inclusive, but still denied basic access to those who carried in their skin and soul the legacy of exclusion. This store is mine, but what it represents goes far beyond me. Are you with me? One by one, the team members nodded, some in tears, others silent, but with their fists clenched. The moment was not one of comfort. It was one of commitment. Amara knew her fight didn't end there. She knew that prejudice would change form, that it would return in passive-aggressive emails, in meetings where her voice would be interrupted, in clients who would mistake her for a salesperson. But that day, in front of her team, she reaffirmed the foundation of her fight with the strength of someone who does not accept being invisible, not even for a second longer. The store, the brand, the name, everything was yours. And she was there, to defend every inch of it, with voice, with presence, with truth. In the hours following the event, the movement within the soul's Aurora was silent, almost reverent. Each employee returned to their post, but the energy was not the same. There was a new weight hanging in the air, not of fear, but of responsibility. Amara didn't stay for the end-of-day meeting. He left the team under the temporary leadership of Yazm, who immediately took on the role with firmness and care. The young woman, now in charge of reorganizing the service processes, started a conversation with her colleagues. Nothing corporate, just space to listen, feel, and rebuild. Meanwhile, on social media, the episode was leaked. A customer who was in the store recorded the moment of the dismissal, and the video went viral. The public reacted with fury and empathy. Hashtags like Amara Fields, Racismo de Luxo, and Aurora and Alma Consciente exploded on Twitter and Instagram. Most of the comments praised Amara's firm stance, transforming her into a symbol of corporate resistance. Influencers, activists, and even competitors spoke out. Hours later, Amara published an official note on the company's website and on its networks. Covert or blatant discrimination will not be tolerated in any environment I build. Today I was not just a CEO, I was once again a black woman breaking through an old wall, but this wall is cracking, and we are going to push it together. The repercussion led Aurora to be invited to participate in a panel on diversity in the luxury sector. Amara accepted, but not out of vanity, but to continue talking, to continue bothering, to continue rebuilding. That same day, she received more than 300 resumes from young black men and women wanting to join the company. Something had changed, and the world, albeit slowly, had listened. 2 days later, Mara returned to the store. He wasn't wearing the CEO blazer or the sapphire necklace. He was wearing simple clothes, linen pants, a black blouse, and comfortable sneakers. Walked around the store without announcing his presence, but this time the looks were different. There was respect, acceptance, and redemptive shame. Yazm greeted her with a genuine smile and teary eyes. "It's all in progress, Mrs. Fields. The changes have begun, and everyone is committed." Amara felt it without having to say much. He walked past each shop window with the calm of someone who knows every detail, every polished curve, every hand-picked metal. He stopped in front of a new piece that he didn't recognize. A small pendant in the shape of a clenched fist with black stones embedded. "I don't remember approving that one," she commented, looking curiously at Yazm. The young girl smiled shyly. The team created it in her honor. We call it Iron and Light, because that's what you represented to us." Mara was silent for a moment. She touched the glass delicately. A subtle gesture, almost imperceptible, but full of meaning. For the first time in a long time, he felt that something had truly changed. Not just in the store, but in the way people around him looked at him. When he left, he didn't look back. He knew that true transformation did not depend on his constant presence, but on the seed he had planted there, the courage to not remain silent. And that now flourished. The city continued to pulsate outside, but inside Amara there was peace, not because she had won, but because she had faced it with elegance, with firmness, and with the truth that, after all, no one could deny. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to follow more stories like this, real or inspired by reality, but always guided by the truth that needs to be told. Comment below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar? How do you believe companies should act when faced with structural prejudice? Share this story, because silence changes nothing, but a shared voice does. Transforms. Amara Fields' journey isn't just about racism or justice. It's about dignity, belonging, and power. It's about breaking down barriers that still exist, even when everyone pretends they do need. It's about remembering that the fight doesn't end when you get there. In fact, it's just beginning. Mara is a symbol of those who refuse to lower their eyes, even when faced with indifference disguised as formality. And his story invites us to also be guardians of change, at work, on the streets, in the details of everyday life. Thank you for watching, listening, and feeling. Remember, the courage of one person can affect the conscience of thousands, and each gesture of determination can be the spark that starts a revolution. No,